So the lighting today is not that great. It's been snowing like mad these days, so it looks like it's like white out in my background, and it kind of technically is. Um, but I am very happy, despite the lighting, to be going over stoicism and spirituality and how they essentially intersect and mesh and support each other. I have been a big fan of both stoicism and spirituality, and they're very much connected. They've helped me kind of get a hold of my emotions, better react, and just be engaged in the universe and whatever happens to me in this experiential form. So without further ado, let's get into stoicism, spirituality, and how the two interact so that you can use these concepts and this understanding to be a better you. What is stoicism? Stoicism is a philosophy of ethics which encourages the practice of the highest possible virtue to actually help you live a pleasurable life. The idea behind it is that when you do act virtuously and with moral excellence, in a karmic kind of way, it comes back to you because you get to live a pleasurable life. Being virtuous would mean acting with moral excellence, as I've said, and doing right by the universe and those around you, and just contributing to the greater good and being very diligent with it. It's a lifelong practice, the idea of stoicism. So the root word stoic means to be pretty much indifferent, almost callous to the world. But for me, I see it as just taking a step back, waiting, and processing the situation in order to then give a proper and conducive response. Even then, when the reaction or response is given, it's usually given in a calm and straightforward way so that, if the situation is already chaotic, it doesn't contribute to the augmentation of the chaos. Essentially, you're leveled in your delivery when you practice stoicism. Thus, stoicism as a whole is the embodiment and display of virtue and calm as a system of behavior and mentality in the way one interacts with their environment. And now, what is spirituality on the other hand? Spirituality is a belief and awareness of the connectivity of matters beyond the egocentric self, essentially. So this can mean you are keenly aware of some type of tie to a power source, whether that is God or the divine source, even with others, your environment, and even your deepest, highest self. So spirituality essentially entails the inclination towards understanding and being in tune with the connections one has beyond the self into grander matters like the universe, and often does involve pursuits regarding the purpose and meaning of life. So how does stoicism and spirituality support and intersect with each other? Practices in stoicism and spirituality tend to actually be grounded in the same kind of root premises, but with stoicism there's a logic and practical way in the approach within these practices, whereas spirituality has a more enlightened and ephemeral, ethereal content with it. I feel like the practice of journaling, for example, is a practice very heavily encouraged in both stoicism and spiritual domains. In spirituality, journaling is bound with developing yourself and environmental awareness. And in stoicism, it is likewise, but there is a little bit of an emphasis to take one's reflections and the awareness of the self and the environment and the situation one is in, and conforming it into virtuous and logical premises. So ensuring that your thoughts are formulated in a way that reflects virtue and logic is heavily emphasized in stoicism, just because it is a little bit more of a logic-based practice. But journaling nonetheless is a practice that, especially these days, is encouraged in both schools of thoughts and practices. Temperance is also a principle very heavily practiced and encouraged in both spirituality and stoicism. But in spirituality, being temperate with one's emotions and allowing oneself to be with their emotions helps to better understand the pathology and the emotional roots to what they're feeling, and to help them work past emotional reactivity to generate inner peace and bliss, essentially. In stoicism, temperance is wielded to encourage self-mastery and move towards acting morally in the face of charged situations so that you can diligently and morally conduct good and avoid giving into the negatively charged emotional tension. So essentially, sitting with one's emotions and transmuting one's temperate into a still and morally reactive output is what spirituality and stoicism both enlist and encourage in their practices. Seeing darkness as the way to light and virtue are both levied in spiritual and stoic domains. In stoic literature, a quote penned by, I believe, Ryan Holiday in his book The Obstacle is the Way, which is a sentiment carried around stoicism in general and is also reflected in spirituality. In the stoic framework, seeing obstacles and the triumph over them as the ultimate path to the best possible and moral outcome is likened to shadow work in spirituality, where instead of avoiding the darker and difficult sides of the self, avoiding triggers and all the obstacles which bring about an initial negative connotation, instead facing the trigger and the difficult shadowed parts of the self is the best way to enlightenment and being lighter and the airier self. So detachment is also a strong theme levied in both stoicism and spirituality. In the stoic sense, Marcus Aurelius drew on the idea of taking the view from above, or Plato's view, wherein one takes the perspective of zooming out of one's egocentric perspective to devalue the daily worries and stresses which come and allow it to settle into an emotional calm over whatever matters are stressing you out. Not to be avoidant of the matters themselves, but so that you're not constantly bearing the weight of their associations to the point of excessive unease. In spirituality, on the other hand, detachment is prominent with works around Buddhism and actually even manifestations. To detach from your desires allows you a peace of mind from fretting over them, and even in manifestations, detaching and letting go of the outcome allows you to make emotional, mental, and environmental clearance and space in your life to magnetize whatever you intend to, but not attached to the outcomes at the same time. So you have the intention to bring about whatever you are trying to solicit. However, you're detached from the outcome and stay within the process, essentially, when it comes to spirituality. And so detachment spirituality is a form of faith and developing ease with the process of living. So if you can understand the concepts and the strengths of logic and moral virtue in stoicism and muddle it with the practices of spirituality where you seek to connect to greater matters beyond the egocentric self, as well as what those two do together when combined, you can really practice being a better person, essentially, especially when you involve the practices used in both stoicism and spirituality and the ideas behind them in your daily life. For example, journaling to ensure that you are developing that environmental and self-awareness, but also making sure that it reflects a moral good in what you do. And keeping temperament as well. I find that journaling does actually help me keep temperament, instead of saying and doing the bad, weird, strange impulses that we have been programmed to do and choosing violence. And when I write things down, I have an outlet instead to remind myself how to act better. And also just grounding yourself in ideas like doing shadow work, which is both prominent in stoicism and spirituality, because you need to train your perceptions, as stoicism kind of encourages. Train your perceptions into better, righteous, and virtuous ones, which is akin to the spirituality approach to shadow work, which is understanding the darker parts of yourself so that you can contrast and understand the light in yourself as well, because you need to understand things in its duality in order to value both your dark and your light self, your highest self, I would say. And then just like detachment as well, as I said, detachment from the outcome, detachment from the daily worries of life. It helps you feel more at ease with your existence, as well as more comfortable with the processes of having to obtain things like in manifestation. So detachment is very important in both stoicism and spirituality, and as a whole, both spirituality and stoicism grounds themselves in all the concepts that I've went over today in order to strengthen your mind, your consciousness, your body, your soul, and even the things around you, because when you do work on yourself, it bleeds into the environment around you. Life is essentially a mirror, and whatever is going inside in here will reflect back onto you some way, somehow. So hopefully this video was insightful and you guys better understand a little bit more about stoicism and spirituality. I know I'm learning more about it every day, and I loved researching all of this in order to create the points for this video. So if you enjoyed it, stick around and hopefully see you guys in the next video. Bye for now.